It was a terrifying story of harassment that shocked the fan base, a story of escalating aggression, of fear, and of a woman pushed to the brink. Caryn Chandler, the longtime partner of Matt Roloff, came forward with a story that painted Amy Roloff as a dangerous, unhinged ex-wife. She claimed a pattern of harassment and intimidation, complete with slashed tires and threatening notes left on her car. She had photos, she had a timeline, she had a narrative that seemed to the uninformed tragically believable. The trap was set, designed to legally bar Amy from the farm forever and cement her public image as the villain. But the real horror, the truly shocking part of this story, is that the victim was also the perpetrator, and it was all caught on tape. Before we dive into the explosive details of this intricate deception, a deception that has the potential to bring down the entire Little People, Big World empire, I need you to do one thing. If you believe the truth must come out, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. You are not going to want to miss a single update on this story, and by subscribing, you ensure that you're the first to know. This is LPBW Update, and we are about to expose the biggest lie in the show's history. Let's rewind to November 2025. The air in Oregon was getting crisp, the last of the pumpkin patch crowds had gone home, and a quiet tension, so familiar to fans of the show, hung over Roloff Farms. It was then that the news broke, first as a trickle on social media, then as a torrent through entertainment news outlets. Caryn Chandler had filed for a restraining order against Amy Roloff. The court documents, which were immediately leaked, read like a script from a psychological thriller. Caryn alleged that Amy had engaged in a months-long campaign of terror. The filing detailed late-night drive-bys past the new house Matt had built for them, a series of anonymous, threatening notes left on Caryn's car, and the shocking climax: 2 of her tires slashed in the dead of night. Caryn, sources say, presented a compelling case. She had photographs of the damage. She had saved the notes, which were filled with vitriolic, hateful language. She tearfully told the police, and later a judge, that she feared for her safety. She claimed Amy was obsessed, unable to let go of the farm and of Matt, and that her jealousy had finally boiled over into dangerous criminal behavior. The fan base was instantly divided, but the narrative Caryn had so carefully crafted for over a decade was working its dark magic. The story of unstable, bitter Amy was the foundational lie upon which this entire scheme was built. For years, through carefully chosen words in on-camera confessionals and strategically leaked stories to tabloids, Caryn had painted Amy as the jealous ex-wife, a woman incapable of moving on. She portrayed herself as the calm, rational one, the peacemaker who was just trying to navigate a difficult situation with grace. This restraining order was meant to be the final, devastating brushstroke on that masterpiece of manipulation. The media ran with it. Headlines screamed Amy Roloff's violent rampage and Caryn Chandler fears for her life. TLC producers were reportedly in a state of panic, holding emergency meetings to discuss how to handle the implosion of their flagship show's carefully managed family dynamic. Public perception, a weapon Caryn had wielded with surgical precision, was turning against Amy with terrifying speed. She was being tried and convicted in the court of public opinion before she even had a chance to speak. Friends were calling, family was worried, and the world Amy had built post-divorce seemed to be crumbling around her, all because of a lie. But what Caryn didn't know, what no one knew, was that Amy Roloff was no longer playing defense. She was a protagonist who had prepared for war. Over a year prior to this incident, Amy had started to notice a pattern of strange, unsettling occurrences. It was nothing she could prove, nothing concrete, just a series of small things that left her feeling off balance and paranoid. A sentimental piece of jewelry would go missing from her nightstand, only to reappear in an obvious, almost staged location a week later. A private conversation she had with Chris would somehow be referenced in a vague, passive-aggressive way by Caryn days later. Rumors would start among the farmhands, whispers that Amy had been agitated or acting strangely, rumors that always seemed to trace back to a concerned comment Caryn had made to someone. It was death by 1,000 cuts, a subtle gaslighting campaign designed to make Amy question her own sanity. But it didn't work. Instead, it sharpened her senses. Amy, a woman who has spent decades navigating the complex politics of her own family on national television, recognized the strategy. She saw the long game being played and decided to change the rules. Quietly, without telling a soul, not even Chris, she invested in a state-of-the-art security system. This wasn't some off-the-shelf bundle from a big box store. This was a sophisticated network of motion-activated, high-definition micro cameras. They were tiny, easily concealed, and covered every conceivable access point around her own property. More importantly, she managed to legally and discreetly place a camera with a powerful zoom lens overlooking the shared farm driveway, a public access road where much of the alleged harassment was supposed to have taken place. She had secure, timestamp cloud storage for every second of footage. It was her secret insurance policy, a silent digital witness waiting for the performance it was installed to capture. The preliminary hearing for the restraining order was a media circus. Caryn arrived, flanked by a high-powered attorney, looking every bit the fragile victim. She dabbed her eyes with a tissue as her lawyer laid out the evidence. He presented the glossy photographs of the scratched car door, the 2 flattened tires. He produced plastic bagged notes, reading their cruel words aloud for the court. He painted a picture of his client as a woman living in constant fear, a prisoner in her own home because of Amy Roloff's relentless campaign of intimidation. Amy sat beside her lawyer, her expression unreadable. To the reporters in the room, she looked stoic, perhaps even cold, which only served to fuel the narrative Caryn had built. Matt Roloff was noticeably absent, a fact that many interpreted as his tacit support for Caryn. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her late 50s, listened intently, her expression growing more concerned with each piece of evidence presented. It looked like an open and shut case. Caryn's lawyer was confident, already planning the press statement he would deliver on the courthouse steps. Then it was Amy's turn. Her lawyer, a calm and methodical man named David Chen, stood up. "Your Honor," he began, "we won't be disputing the evidence presented. The damage to Ms. Chandler's car is real. The notes are real." A murmur went through the courtroom. Caryn's lawyer smirked. This was going to be easier than he thought. However, Chen continued, his voice dropping slightly, "We will be presenting evidence that clarifies with absolute certainty who the perpetrator of these acts was. We would like to play a video file for the court. It's from a security camera, timestamped November 14th, 2025 at 2:17 a.m. 2 full days before my client was even aware of these allegations and before any police report was filed." A large monitor was wheeled in and positioned to face the judge. The courtroom fell silent. David Chen clicked a key on his laptop and the video began to play. The footage was crisp in high-definition black and white, illuminated by an infrared light source. It showed the shared farm driveway, and parked in the center of the frame was Caryn Chandler's recognizable late-model SUV. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then a figure entered the frame from the right. The figure was wearing a dark hooded sweatshirt, the hood pulled up low over their face. The figure walked with a distinctive, slightly shuffling gait, a walk that anyone who had watched the show for years would instantly recognize. The figure approached the driver's side of the SUV. In the courtroom, Caryn's face had gone rigid. Her eyes were locked on the screen, her confident facade beginning to crack. On the monitor, the hooded figure calmly reached into a pocket, pulled out a folded piece of paper and tucked it under the windshield wiper of the SUV. Then the figure paused, looked around the empty driveway, and produced a small metallic object from another pocket. The camera's high-definition lens was good enough to catch the glint of metal. It was a key. The figure then deliberately, methodically, dragged the key along the driver's side door, leaving a long, deep scratch in the paint. The sound wasn't audible, but the action was unmistakable. The figure then walked to the front of the vehicle, knelt down, and the audience could see the unmistakable motion of someone deflating a tire. The figure then moved to the rear tire and did the same. After a few moments, the person stood up, pulled the hood back slightly, revealing the unmistakable profile of Caryn Chandler, before turning and walking calmly back the way they came, disappearing from the frame. A collective gasp went through the courtroom. Caryn's lawyer stared at the screen, his mouth agape. He looked at his client, whose face was now ashen, a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. The judge's expression had transformed from one of sympathy to one of cold, simmering rage. The video, the core-smoking gun, had done its job. It was irrefutable, timestamp proof of a calculated, malicious lie. But the horror show for Caryn Chandler was only just beginning. Amy's lawyer wasn't finished. "Your Honor," David Chin said, his voice ringing with authority, "the video evidence is clear. But to establish a pattern of premeditation and malicious intent, the defense calls its only witness Mr. Chris Marek." Chris, Amy's husband, who had been sitting quietly in the gallery, stood up and walked to the witness stand. This was the unexpected internal betrayal, the twist that would take Caryn's crime from a simple lie to a complex conspiracy. After being sworn in, Chris looked not at the lawyers, but directly at the judge. His testimony would become the final nail in Caryn's coffin. He stated under oath that approximately 4 months earlier, in July of 2025, Caryn had approached him in private. She had claimed with a performance of deep concern that she was worried about Amy. She told Chris that Amy seemed to be struggling and exhibiting erratic behavior. She had asked Chris, as Amy's husband, to keep an eye on her and report back to her if Amy did anything unusual. Chris testified that he found the request deeply inappropriate and manipulative. He told the court, "It felt wrong. It felt like she was trying to recruit me to spy on my own wife. She wasn't concerned for Amy. She was trying to build a case against her to plant a seed of doubt in my mind. I told her that Amy was fine and that her private life was none of Caryn's business." This testimony was a masterstroke. It established a clear pattern of premeditation. It proved that the restraining order wasn't an impulsive act of desperation, but the culmination of a months-long plot to frame Amy. Caryn hadn't just faked the evidence. She had tried to recruit a co-conspirator, Amy's own husband, to help her sell the lie. She wanted an inside man to validate her claims. Chris's refusal and his subsequent testimony in court exposed the depth of her deception. He had refused to betray his wife, and now he was providing the character witness testimony that sealed Caryn's fate. The judge had heard enough. She slammed her gavel down, the sound echoing through the stunned courtroom. "This is not just a case of a falsehood," she declared, her voice filled with fury. "This is an egregious and calculated abuse of the justice system. The request for a restraining order is not only denied, it is thrown out with extreme prejudice." She turned her gaze directly to Caryn, who looked as if she might collapse. "You have willingly and knowingly filed a false police report. You have presented falsified evidence to this court, and you have committed perjury under oath. This court will not tolerate being used as a weapon in a personal vendetta." The judge then did something that sent a shockwave through the room and would soon send a shockwave through the reality TV world. She looked at the court stenographer and said, Let the record show that I am referring this entire matter to the district attorney's office for immediate investigation and prosecution. I am recommending charges of felony perjury, filing a false police report, and falsifying evidence. The legal threat had escalated beyond anything Caryn could have imagined. This was no longer about a restraining order or a family squabble. She was now facing serious felony charges, the kind that carry significant jail time. The trap she had so carefully designed for Amy had snapped shut on herself. The hunter had become the hunted. As court was adjourned and Caryn was escorted out by her shell-shocked lawyer, she was met with a barrage of camera flashes and reporters shouting questions. But now, the questions were different. They weren't asking about Amy's harassment. They were asking if she was going to be arrested. The victim narrative she had spent years cultivating had been utterly and completely annihilated in the space of a single afternoon, all because of a few tiny hidden cameras and the integrity of one man who refused to be manipulated. The war for Roloff Farms had just entered a new and far more dangerous phase. The chaos that erupted on the courthouse steps was a feeding frenzy. As Caryn Chandler, her face a pale, slack-jawed mask of disbelief, was hustled through the throng by her attorney, the questions came like machine gun fire. Caryn, did you stage the harassment? Will you be charged? Why did you lie to the court? She said nothing, her eyes darting around wildly, not seeing the reporters but searching for an escape that no longer existed. The woman who had so masterfully controlled her image for over a decade was now utterly exposed, stripped bare of her carefully constructed victimhood in the harsh light of the public square. Matt Roloff, who had reportedly been waiting in a black SUV a block away to whisk Caryn away to a celebratory lunch, was nowhere to be seen. Sources close to the production team say he was on the phone with his own lawyer within minutes of the judge's referral, the celebratory lunch plans instantly vaporizing, replaced by the cold, stark reality of damage control. His partner wasn't just in trouble, she was radioactive, and he was standing right in the blast zone. In stark contrast, Amy Roloff and Marek emerged a few minutes later. They didn't sneak out a side door. They walked straight out the front, heads held high. They were not smiling, not gloating. They looked somber, relieved, and exhausted. Amy stopped briefly, the cameras and microphones surging towards her. She leaned in and said only this, her voice steady and clear. The truth came out today. That's all I have ever wanted. My family has been through enough. Please respect our privacy as we begin to heal. And with that, she and Chris walked to their car and drove away, leaving the smoldering wreckage of Caryn's lies behind them. Amy's statement was a masterclass in dignity. She took the highest of high roads, refusing to kick her opponent when she was down. She didn't have to. The justice system and her own secret cameras had already done that for her. Now, let's break down the legal maelstrom that Caryn Chandler has plunged herself into. This is not a slap on the wrist. The judge's referral to the district attorney's office is the legal equivalent of sounding a 5-alarm fire. We've spoken to legal analysts, and they all agree Caryn is in a world of trouble. First, there's the charge of filing a false police report. In Oregon, this is a Class A misdemeanor, carrying up to a year in jail and a hefty fine. It's a serious offense because it wastes law enforcement resources and can ruin innocent lives, as it was intended to do to Amy. But it gets much, much worse. The charge of falsifying evidence, specifically creating the fake notes and staging the damage to her own car with the intent to mislead a judge, is a Class B felony. That carries a potential sentence of up to 10 years in prison. But the biggest charge, the one that makes prosecutors see red, is perjury. When Caryn Chandler stood in that courtroom, raised her right hand and swore to tell the truth, and then proceeded to tell a story she knew was a complete fabrication, She committed a felony against the very foundation of the American justice system. Perjury is a direct assault on the court's ability to function. In Oregon, it's a Class C felony, punishable by up to 5 years in prison. When you add it all up, Caryn isn't just facing the end of her reality TV career. She is facing the very real possibility of spending years behind bars. The DA of Washington County, a man known for his tough-on-crime stance, will not see this as a family drama. He will see a wealthy, privileged individual who cynically tried to use his office and the courts as a tool to harass and frame an innocent person. Prosecutors, our sources say, live for cases like this. It sends a message that no one is above the law. As the legal walls began to close in on Caryn, the Roloff family itself began to implode. The shockwaves from that courtroom detonated years of simmering tensions, forcing every member of the family to choose a side. And according to our insiders, the schism was immediate and brutal. Zach and Tori Roloff were the first to react. A source extremely close to the couple has confirmed to LPBW Update that Zach called his father Matt less than an hour after the news broke. The source described the call as explosive. Zach was reportedly livid, not just at Caryn, but at his father for allowing this to happen, for standing by and validating Caryn's narrative for years. "How could you let her do this to my mom?" he allegedly screamed at Matt. "How could you be so blind?" The call ended with Zach telling his father that he, Tori, and the kids were done. They would not be visiting the farm as long as Caryn was a part of his life. They were drawing a hard line in the sand, protecting their children from the toxicity and standing unequivocally with Amy. Tori, for her part, posted a cryptic but clear message on her Instagram story. A simple image with the text, "The truth will always set you free." For the millions who follow her, the meaning was unmistakable. Jeremy and Audrey Roloff, ever conscious of their carefully curated brand of Christian values and intentional living, took a more public but less direct approach. They released a joint statement on their blog, a masterwork of strategic neutrality. "We are deeply saddened by the recent events concerning our family," the statement read. "This is a private matter that has unfortunately become public. Our sole focus at this time is on prayer and healing for everyone involved. We ask for privacy as we navigate this difficult time." While it avoids taking a direct side, the key here is what it doesn't say. It doesn't defend Caryn. It doesn't defend Matt. By calling for healing for everyone involved, they implicitly acknowledge that a great wrong has been done. An insider tells us that behind the scenes, their position is much clearer. They are horrified. A scandal involving felony charges and a plot to frame a family member is poison to their beating 50% marriage brand. They have reportedly canceled all joint appearances with Matt and are quietly severing any business ties to the farm, distancing themselves as quickly and quietly as possible. The most powerful and direct condemnation, however, came from the one family member everyone expected it from, Jacob Roloff. Jacob, who famously left the show years ago, citing the contrived and toxic environment, took to his personal Twitter account and did not hold back. In a multi-tweet thread, he wrote, "For years, I've talked about the manipulative, fake reality the show creates. I've been called bitter and ungrateful. Today, my mother was vindicated. She was the victim of a calculated criminal plot designed to destroy her reputation, a plot orchestrated by someone who has been a part of this toxic machine for years. This wasn't reality TV drama. This was a crime. I have never been more proud of my mom's strength and resilience. The mask is off. The real show is just beginning." Jacob's statement was a nuclear bomb. It was not only a full-throated defense of his mother, but also a complete indictment of the show and the environment Matt had fostered on the farm. He framed Caryn not as a rogue actor, but as a symptom of a larger disease, And for the legions of fans who have long suspected the show's reality was far from real, Jacob's words were pure validation. Molly, the most private of the Roloff siblings, remained publicly silent as expected. However, a source very close to Amy confirms that Molly was the first of the children to call her. The call was brief and emotional, with Molly simply telling her mother, "I love you, and I am so sorry you went through this. I'm here for you, whatever you need." This brings us to the man at the center of the storm, Matt Roloff. Where does he go from here? His meticulously built empire, his legacy, is now tied to a woman facing felony charges for framing his ex-wife and the mother of his 4 children. Our sources paint a picture of a man in complete crisis, trapped between his loyalty to his fiancée and the catastrophic consequences of her actions. One farm employee, who wishes to remain anonymous, described a scene at the new house Matt built for Caryn the night after the court hearing. They reported hearing a horrendous screaming match that went on for over an hour. The employee couldn't make out all the words, but clearly heard Matt yelling, "Yo, you told me she was harassing you. You swore to me. You ruined us." In Caryn's sobbing response, "I did it for us. I did it so we could finally have the farm and be free of her." This alleged exchange is incredibly revealing. It suggests that Caryn manipulated Matt, just as she tried to manipulate the court. She likely fed him a steady diet of lies and half-truths about Amy for years, playing on his own frustrations and ego until he was primed to believe her story. Now, the blinders have been violently ripped off. Matt Roloff, the master planner, the man who thinks 10 steps ahead, has been played. He is now faced with an impossible choice. Does he stand by Caryn, funding her massive legal defense, and in doing so, become complicit in her crimes in the eyes of the public and his own children? This would mean total alienation from his entire family, permanent damage to the Roloff Farms brand, and the end of the television show that made him a millionaire. Or does he cut her loose? Does he issue a public statement condemning her actions, ending the engagement, and throwing her to the wolves to save himself? This would be a ruthless act of self-preservation, painting him as a victim of her deception as well. But it might be the only move he has left to salvage his relationship with his children and his business. Either way, the dream home he built with Caryn has become a prison of his own making. And what about the network? What about TLC? This scandal is a Category 5 hurricane heading directly for their flagship family-friendly reality show. An unnamed source, a mid-level executive at the network, has told LPBW Update that the mood at TLC headquarters is one of pure, unadulterated panic. The show, as it currently exists, is over. It is unsalvageable. Their carefully crafted narrative of a blended, modern family navigating a complicated divorce has been exposed as a complete sham. Worse, one of their primary cast members is now an accused felon. The source confirms that all production on the upcoming season has been halted indefinitely. Lawyers are poring over Caryn Chandler's and Matt Roloff's contracts, looking specifically for the morality clause. This is a standard clause in most television contracts that allows the network to terminate the agreement if a cast member engages in behavior that brings the network or the show into public disrepute or results in criminal charges. Caryn's actions are a textbook violation. The executive outlined 3 potential scenarios currently being debated in emergency C meetings. Scenario 1, cancel the show entirely. This is the cleanest option. Issue a statement, pay out the remaining contracts, and walk away from the whole mess. This protects the network's brand, but also means killing one of their longest-running and most profitable properties. Scenario 2, the retool. This would involve firing Caryn immediately, likely Matt as well, and attempting to rebuild the show entirely around Amy and Chris. It would be rebranded as Little People, Big World, A New Chapter, or something similar. This would capitalize on Amy's newfound public sympathy and vindication, positioning her as the triumphant survivor. It's a risky move that could either be a massive hit or a spectacular failure. Scenario 3, the most cynical and unlikely option, the redemption arc. This would involve keeping Caryn on the show and documenting her legal battles, her remorse, and her attempts to make amends. This would be a ratings bonanza in the short term, but the source says the potential for backlash is so high that it's considered a nuclear option that would permanently tarnish the TLC brand. No matter what they choose, the little people, big world that fans have known for nearly 2 decades is dead. In the midst of all this chaos, Amy Roloff has found a quiet strength. Her gamble, her decision to prepare for the worst, paid off in a way she could never have imagined. She didn't just win a court case, she reclaimed her own story. For over 10 years, she was forced to endure a public narrative that she was difficult, bitter, and jealous. Every sigh, every moment of frustration, every disagreement with Matt was edited and framed to fit this pre-written script. Now, the world sees the truth. The world sees that her frustration wasn't bitterness. It was a response to being systematically marginalized and gaslighted. Her inability to move on wasn't jealousy. It was the intuition of a woman who knew she was being undermined at every turn. This vindication has completely recontextualized the show's history. Fans are now going back, watching old episodes with new eyes, and seeing the subtle manipulation, the passive-aggressive comments from Caryn, the way Amy's legitimate concerns were dismissed by Matt as her just being emotional. The hidden cameras didn't just capture a crime, they revealed a decade-long truth. And through it all, Marek has emerged as the unsung hero of this story. His loyalty to Amy, his refusal to be drawn into Caryn's web of deceit, and his courage to testify against her have solidified their relationship in a way nothing else could. He didn't just stand by his wife, he stood up for her in a court of law and in the court of public opinion. Theirs is now the only authentic and healthy relationship at the center of this shattered universe. The road ahead is still long and uncertain. The legal process will grind on for months, perhaps even years. There will be motions, hearings, and endless speculation. Our sources in the DA's office suggest that, given the overwhelming video evidence, they will likely offer Caryn a plea bargain. However, they will insist on a deal that includes a full public admission of guilt and felony conviction on her record. They want to make an example of her. Will she take the deal to avoid the spectacle of a trial and the risk of a much longer prison sentence? Or will her pride and desperation lead her to fight a losing battle in court, dragging the Roloff family through an even more agonizing public trial? Matt Roloff will have to make his choice, and that choice will define the rest of his life. The Roloff children will have to figure out how to rebuild a family that has been fractured, perhaps irreparably. And Amy Roloff will finally, after so many years, have the chance to live her life free from the shadow of the foundational lie that almost destroyed her. The restraining order hoax was meant to be the end of Amy's story on Roloff Farms. Instead, it became the beginning of her ultimate vindication and the final self-inflicted end of Caryn Chandler's reign. The question now is not who was lying, but how many people will be brought down by the fallout from that lie. This wasn't just a lie, it was a crime. It was a calculated attempt to destroy a woman's life using the very systems designed to protect us. Do you believe Caryn Chandler should face the maximum penalty for this level of manipulation and criminal deception? Vote yes or no in the poll in the comments in the community tab. Let your voice be heard. And make sure you are subscribed because we will be following every single development in this incredible story. You won't want to miss what happens next.